Ladies and gentlemen, when you truly begin to understand what it means to walk alone with God, you start to realize that solitude is not a punishment. It is a privilege. Most people fear being alone. They associate it with weakness, isolation, or rejection. They think that walking alone means being abandoned, being unseen, or being forgotten. But the truth is, walking alone with God is the highest form of strength you can ever cultivate. When you are able to silence the noise of the world and walk in that quiet place where only you and God exist, you step into a dimension of power that most people will never access. Think about it. The world is filled with distractions, voices, opinions, and endless pressures. Everywhere you look, someone is trying to influence how you think, how you feel, and what you believe. If you spend your life seeking validation from people, you will always be tossed back and forth like a leaf in the wind. One moment you'll feel good because someone applauds you, and the next moment you'll feel worthless because someone criticizes you. That is the life of a person disconnected from God. But when you decide to walk alone with Him, you anchor yourself to a source of strength that is not moved by the opinions of others. Suddenly, rejection doesn't break you, loneliness doesn't terrify you, and silence doesn't scare you. Instead, you discover that silence becomes sacred, loneliness becomes peace, and rejection becomes redirection. Walking alone with God teaches you that strength is not measured by how many people stand beside you, but by how deeply you can stand in truth when no one else believes in you. The greatest battles of your life will not be fought in front of a crowd. They will be fought in the secret place, in those moments when you are alone with your thoughts and your fears. And it is there, in that private arena, that walking with God gives you victory. The world only sees the results, your success, your resilience, your breakthroughs. But what they don't see is the long hours you spent in solitude, wrestling with doubt and fear, and choosing to trust God instead. When you walk alone with God, you are no longer desperate for the comfort of the crowd. You are no longer addicted to approval. You are no longer afraid of standing apart. Instead, you realize that separation is sometimes necessary for transformation. Look at the lives of people who shaped history, people who carried vision, wisdom, and strength that impacted generations. They all had to learn to walk alone. The path of destiny is narrow, and it cannot be walked while dragging the weight of everyone's opinions. If you are unwilling to be alone, you will always be limited by the expectations of others. But if you can learn to embrace solitude with God, you can walk into places that ordinary people can't reach. And here's something most people miss: solitude doesn't mean loneliness. Loneliness is the absence of people. Solitude is the presence of God. Loneliness drains you. Solitude renews you. Loneliness creates fear. Solitude creates strength. When you walk alone with God, you begin to see that you are never truly alone. You carry a presence that goes with you everywhere. It whispers wisdom in the middle of confusion. It gives peace in the middle of chaos, and it gives courage in the middle of fear. That kind of strength cannot be shaken by circumstances, because it does not come from circumstances. It comes from above. But this walk requires courage. It requires the courage to disconnect from the world long enough to hear your own thoughts and to hear God's voice. Most people drown themselves in noise because they are afraid of what silence will reveal. They keep themselves busy, scrolling endlessly, talking endlessly, running endlessly, because silence exposes emptiness. But if you can face that silence, you can embrace it instead of avoiding it, you will find that it is not empty after all. It is full of answers, full of direction, full of healing, full of truth. Walking alone with God every day allows you to filter out the noise of the world and to hear the clarity that only comes from His voice. You see, strength is not developed in the spotlight. It is developed in the shadows. It is in those private moments when no one is watching that you develop the discipline, the focus, and the resilience that make you unstoppable in public. Walking alone with God every day means showing up to those private moments consistently, even when no one applauds you, even when no one acknowledges you, even when no one understands you. That is where real character is built. That is where real faith is formed. That is where destiny is shaped. When you master the art of walking alone with God, you no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer beg for people to believe in you. You no longer compromise who you are just to fit into a world that doesn't know your worth. Instead, you rise above the need for constant validation, and you find that your confidence comes from a deeper place. It comes from the knowledge that you are aligned with the one who created you, the one who knows your path, and the one who guides your steps. And when you know that, you realize that solitude is not weakness. It is strength of the highest order. Negative feelings are some of the most misunderstood forces in human life. People are often taught to run from them, to bury them, to numb them, or to fight them aggressively as if they are enemies meant to destroy. But the truth is, negative feelings are not final sentences on your life. They are signals, messages pointing to areas that need attention, growth, or redirection. When you begin to see them in this light, you stop being controlled by them and start learning from them. The problem is not that fear, doubt, or anger exist. The problem is that people interpret them incorrectly and let them rule their decisions. Take fear as an example. Most people feel fear and instantly think it means stop. They feel afraid and assume it's a sign of danger, a warning to retreat. But fear can also mean you are standing at the edge of growth, about to step into something new, something that stretches you. That's why fear shows up before big opportunities. It's a signal that you are leaving your comfort zone. If you mistake it for a permanent barrier, you shrink back and miss the moment. But if you interpret it as a signal, you can use it as fuel to move forward. Fear, then, isn't a sentence. It's a message telling you that something valuable lies on the other side of your discomfort. Doubt works in a similar way. Doubt shows up to test whether you truly believe in yourself, your vision, or your calling. Doubt whispers in your mind, asking, "Are you sure you can do this?" Most people treat that whisper as truth and surrender their dreams. But if you listen more closely, you'll see that doubt isn't a verdict. It's a mirror reflecting the places where your faith needs strengthening. Doubt invites you to go deeper, to gather knowledge, to reaffirm your decision, to build confidence. Without doubt, faith would not need to grow. So when doubt appears, it is not the end of your journey. It is a signal that you must strengthen the foundation of your belief before you advance further. Even feelings like anger, sadness, or frustration carry signals. Anger often points to boundaries being crossed or values being ignored. Sadness signals the need for healing, reflection, or letting go. Frustration shows you that there is a gap between where you are and where you want to be. These emotions are not punishments. They are indicators, like warning lights on the dashboard of a car. If a warning light appears, you don't smash the dashboard in frustration. You check the engine. Likewise, if negative feelings appear, you don't need to destroy yourself. You need to investigate the message behind them. The tragedy is that most people never learn this perspective. They grow up believing that negative feelings make them weak, broken, or unworthy. They push them down, mask them with busyness, drown them in distractions, or hide them behind fake smiles. But what you suppress doesn't disappear, it festers. Buried emotions become chains, and those chains keep people stuck in cycles of fear, insecurity, and hopelessness. The moment you stop treating negative feelings as enemies and start treating them as teachers, you shift from being a victim of your emotions to being a master of them. Think of how different life becomes when you look at negative feelings this way. Instead of saying, "I feel anxious, so I must be powerless," you begin to say, "I feel anxious, so something inside me is calling for trust, preparation, or release." Instead of saying, "I feel angry, so I must be broken," you say, "I feel angry, so a boundary has been crossed and I need to address it." Instead of saying, "I feel doubt, so maybe I should quit," you say, "I feel doubt, so this is my chance to strengthen my belief." The same emotions that once held you hostage become guides that point you toward transformation. This is why people who succeed at the highest levels are not people who never feel negativity. They are people who interpret it differently. They feel fear, but see it as a challenge. They feel doubt, but use it as motivation to grow. They feel frustration, but let it sharpen their focus. They feel sadness, but allow it to deepen their compassion. The emotions do not disappear. They evolve because they are seen through a higher perspective. The key is awareness. Most people live unconsciously, reacting to every emotion as if it were absolute truth. They feel afraid and immediately stop. They feel doubt and immediately surrender. They feel anger and immediately lash out. But when you begin to walk with awareness, you create space between the feeling and the reaction. You pause, you ask, "What is this feeling really trying to tell me?" In that moment of awareness, you reclaim your power. The feeling no longer controls you. You control what you do with it. Walking alone with God every day sharpens this awareness. In solitude, in prayer, in reflection, you begin to see the layers beneath your emotions. You see that fear can be redirected into faith. You see that doubt can be reshaped into wisdom. You see that sadness can be transformed into strength. You no longer label emotions as good or bad. You see them all as useful signals guiding you toward growth, healing, and destiny. Negative feelings were never meant to imprison you. They were designed to instruct you. When you embrace them as signals rather than sentences, you step into mastery of your mind and spirit. Instead of being dragged around by temporary emotions, you begin to use those very emotions as stepping stones to rise higher. Your mind is the greatest tool you will ever possess, and it is also the greatest battlefield you will ever face. The truth that few people are ever told is this: the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life. Your destiny is not shaped by circumstances, by luck, or by chance. It is shaped by the direction of your mind. Everything that exists in your life right now, whether good or bad, began first as a thought. Every achievement, every failure, every opportunity taken, And every opportunity missed can be traced back to what was going on inside your mind at the time. The mind has two sides, the constructive and the destructive. On one side, it holds faith, gratitude, vision, and trust in God. On the other, it holds fear, doubt, negativity, and limitation. Whichever side you feed most consistently will become the master of your life. If you fill your mind daily with negative thoughts, your life will reflect negativity, frustration, and stagnation. If you discipline your mind to think in alignment with truth, abundance, and purpose, your life will reflect growth, clarity, and success. This is not philosophy, it is law. Just as a seed planted in the ground will always produce after its kind, the seeds planted in your mind will always produce after their kind. The challenge is that most people are careless with what they allow into their minds. They consume endless streams of negativity through conversations, media, and environments without realizing that their mind is absorbing it all and shaping their reality accordingly. A person who constantly thinks about scarcity will attract more lack. A person who constantly thinks about failure will sabotage their own progress. A person who constantly entertains fear will never step into their full potential. The mind is like soil. It doesn't care what you plant. It will grow whatever seed is put into it. If you plant weeds, you get weeds. If you plant flowers, you get flowers. That is why guarding your thoughts is not optional. It is essential. Gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to direct the mind toward the constructive side. When you practice gratitude daily, you shift your focus away from what you lack and toward what you have. That shift alone transforms the entire atmosphere of your life. Gratitude attracts more to be grateful for. It sharpens your vision, calms your emotions, and opens your spirit to receive more from God. Fear cannot survive in the presence of gratitude because gratitude is rooted in trust, and trust dismantles fear. Every time you choose gratitude, you are programming your mind to create more abundance. Vision is another powerful force within the mind. Without vision, the mind drifts into confusion, distraction, and despair. Vision gives the mind a target, a destination to aim at. If you wake up each day without vision, your thoughts will scatter in every direction, and your life will reflect that scattered energy. But when you hold a clear vision of who you are becoming, where you are going, and what God has called you to do, your mind begins to align your actions with that vision. Opportunities that once went unnoticed suddenly become visible. Strength you didn't know you had rises up inside you. Vision is like a magnet. It pulls you forward even when circumstances tell you to stop. Faith is the ultimate fuel of the mind. Faith is not just a spiritual word. It is the mental discipline of choosing to believe in the unseen over the seen. Faith trains the mind to see possibilities where others see problems. Faith allows you to stand strong when nothing around you seems to support your belief. Faith doesn't ignore reality, but it refuses to be controlled by it. It acknowledges the storm, but believes in the calm that will follow. It acknowledges the obstacle, but believes in the breakthrough that is coming. A mind filled with faith is unstoppable because it is connected to a higher source of wisdom and power that transcends human limitation. But here's the danger. If you do not intentionally train your mind, it will default to negativity. That's the natural pull of the world. Doubt, fear, worry, and limitation will creep in every single day unless you push back with intentional thought. That is why people who appear to have all the resources, talent, or opportunities still fail, because their minds are programmed with defeat. And that is also why people who start with nothing can rise to incredible levels of success, because their minds are programmed with victory. Your outer life is simply a mirror of your inner life. Change the mirror by changing the reflection inside your mind. Training your mind is a daily discipline. It requires repetition, affirmation, focus, and consistency. You cannot think positively once in a while and expect transformation. Just like muscles grow through repeated exercise, the mind grows through repeated discipline. Daily prayer, affirmations, visualizations, and gratitude practices are not small routines. They are mental workouts that shape your destiny. Each time you choose a thought of faith over fear, you are rewiring your mind. Each time you reject a thought of limitation and replace it with one of possibility, you are reshaping your destiny. Walking alone with God amplifies this process because it removes the external noise and allows you to see the patterns of your thoughts clearly. In solitude, you become aware of how often your mind drifts toward negativity, and in that awareness, you gain the power to redirect it. You start to see how much your destiny has been influenced not by the world outside, but by the world inside. You realize that God has already placed within you the ability to shift your thoughts and therefore shift your future. When you finally grasp this, you stop waiting for external changes to improve your life. You stop waiting for circumstances to align, for people to approve, or for luck to appear. You understand that destiny does not begin outside. It begins inside. Your mind is the architect and your thoughts are the blueprints. Whatever you allow to dominate your thoughts will eventually dominate your reality. Faith has the power to transform the very experience of being alone. Where many people see isolation as weakness, Faith turns it into a source of strength and clarity. Most people avoid being alone because they connect it with emptiness, rejection, or abandonment. They see solitude as a reminder that they are without support or without companionship. But when you carry faith, solitude takes on an entirely new meaning. It stops being a place of weakness and becomes a place of empowerment. What others call isolation, you learn to recognize as the training ground for your spirit, your discipline, and your destiny. Faith is not about denying the reality that you may feel separated from others. It is about choosing to believe that even in that space, you are not truly alone. Faith reminds you that God's presence is closer in solitude than in a crowded room. It teaches you that when everyone else steps back, he steps closer. The quiet becomes filled with whispers of guidance, the stillness becomes filled with strength, and the emptiness becomes filled with vision. People who walk by sight only see the absence of others in moments of isolation, but those who walk by faith see the presence of God in ways that cannot be explained with words. That is why faith has the ability to turn isolation into power. Consider how the greatest breakthroughs often happen in moments of solitude. A person sitting quietly praying, reflecting, or even wrestling with their doubts and fears often emerges with a new vision, a new strength, or a new decision that changes the direction of their life. It is in those quiet moments when there are no distractions that the mind clears and the spirit awakens. Faith is what allows those moments to be seen as opportunities instead of punishments. Without faith, silence feels heavy and unbearable. With faith, silence becomes a sacred atmosphere where transformation takes place. When faith governs your perspective, you stop running from isolation. Instead, you embrace it because you understand that God often works most deeply when you are removed from the noise of the world. Isolation strips away the opinions of others, the constant demands, and the endless comparisons, leaving you face to face with your own thoughts and God's truth. For some, that confrontation feels intimidating, but with faith, it becomes liberating. It is in this state that you discover who you truly are, what you are capable of, and what God is calling you to do. Faith makes you realize that solitude is not the absence of support, but the presence of strength. There is also something unique about the courage that grows in solitude. When you rely on the crowd for validation, your confidence rises and falls depending on whether people cheer for you or criticize you. But when your confidence is forged in solitude through faith, it no longer depends on outside approval. You develop a strength that cannot be taken away by rejection or opposition. Faith gives you an inner foundation that stands firm even when the world doubts you. That is why people who learn to walk in faith during isolation often emerge as leaders, visionaries, and pioneers, because they discovered in solitude a power that others could not see. Faith not only strengthens you in isolation, but also reshapes how you interpret the struggles that come with it. Loneliness without faith can feel like abandonment, but loneliness with faith feels like preparation. Setbacks without faith feel like the end, but setbacks with faith feel like stepping stones. Waiting without faith feels like wasted time, but waiting with faith feels like divine timing. The exact same experiences are interpreted in completely different ways depending on whether you choose to see them through faith or fear. And this choice determines whether isolation weakens you or empowers you. When faith is alive, your imagination becomes sharper, your vision becomes clearer, and your resilience becomes stronger. You stop seeing isolation as an empty space to endure and begin to see it as a sacred workshop where God shapes your future. Think of it as the difference between being locked in a prison cell and being in a training ground. Without faith, solitude feels like confinement. With faith, it feels like preparation for a greater mission. That shift in perspective alone can change the course of your destiny. But faith is not automatic. It must be cultivated. Every day you have to make the choice to trust, even when your emotions tell you otherwise. Faith is strengthened by practice, by prayer, by reflection, by speaking words of truth over your life, and by consistently focusing on what is possible rather than what is impossible. The more you practice faith in moments of isolation, the stronger your spiritual muscles become. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes natural, and what once felt heavy becomes empowering. Faith reshapes your relationship with solitude until it no longer feels like something to avoid but something to embrace. This is why people who cultivate faith often appear unshakable to others. It's not that they never experience isolation, setbacks, or rejection. It's that they interpret those experiences differently. Where most people see emptiness, they see opportunity. Where most people feel weakness, they feel strength. Where most people would give up, they push forward because their faith tells them that what looks like the end is simply a step toward a greater beginning. Faith transforms the experience of walking alone into the foundation for walking in purpose. The truth is, isolation will come to everyone at some point in life. There will be seasons where you feel separated, misunderstood, or unseen. The difference between those who crumble and those who rise is not the presence of isolation, but the presence of faith. With faith, Isolation becomes a sacred process that shapes your character, sharpens your vision, and fuels your destiny. It is in that sacred space of solitude, empowered by faith, that you learn to walk not in fear of being alone, but in the strength of knowing that you are never truly alone.